Hi there, I'm Zach Kircher, and you're watching Kircher Talks Entertainment. I bid you welcome to the next episode in my series, I Have Never Seen, which as the name suggests, I review movies that I have never seen before. Specifically, older films that get voted on by all of you. For this 8th video in the series, I wanted to do a high school movie, given that kids are either already getting back in school or are just about to. What I asked you guys to do was to choose between me watching a funny or a serious high school movie, and you chose the funny. From there, I narrowed down 4 options of movies that you could pick from, and you all pretty decisively voted on Superbad. So, that's what I'll be talking about today. Now, if you are interested in helping decide what future videos in this series are going to be about, please consider subscribing to my channel, and then also be sure to watch out for posts on my community page. All of the reviews for this series will be decided by the polls which are featured on that community page. Now, part of the reason why I wanted to do a high school movie in the first place is because I thought it would be kind of fun to challenge my bias against a kind of movie that I just typically don't care for, and high school movies are one of them.
I don't understand a word you just said.
What I mean by that is that I've always thought that most high school movies were pretty exaggerated depictions of what it's actually like to be in high school. Obviously they're movies, and so there is going to be some degree of exaggeration going on in those kinds of things, but it's just one of those things where, every film fan, for the most part, they might be willing to watch quote-unquote any kind of movie, but there are some that they just don't respond to as much, no matter how good those movies may be on paper. Some people don't really care for horror movies, some people don't like movies in other languages from their own, other people don't like sad endings. For me, the kinds of movies that I don't really respond to as much are, and I apologize in advance to my wife for the first one I'll say, is romantic comedies, then road trip movies, raunchy comedies, which Superbad is one of those too, the avant-garde, those kind of puffy films that, you would think, people who go to museums and drink wine at home would like to watch, and last but not least, high school movies. Another reason for me not really responding to high school movies as much is simply because my experience in high school was different than most other people. I don't want to come across as though the fact that I'm different makes me better than other people. It's just that I found myself in a good crowd of people who didn't really pressure me into doing stupid things. I had one group of buddies that I still hang out with to this day who we would get together to play like Halo and stuff or other video games and whatever else, seemed fun to us. And then my other co-ed friend group who I mainly hung out with at school itself, we would just do random stuff at someone's house, like, play board games, we'd watch a movie, or we'd just chill. All of this is to say that because of the friend groups that I kicked with, in the late 2000s and the early 2010s, and with my upbringing and that I didn't really watch R-rated movies in general anyway in my household, I wasn't exactly in the target demographic for this movie even when it came out. But I was glad that Superbad got picked because I wanted to challenge some of my preconceived notions about its story, that being where we have a trio of high school seniors, Seth, played by Jonah Hill, Evan, played by Michael Cera, and then Fogel, played by Christopher Mintz-Plasse. I apologize if I said that name wrong. And they're all trying to get laid before they graduate.
When you hear girls saying I was so last night, I shouldn't have that guy. We could be that mistake.
And in the process of trying to do so, they try to get a bunch of booze for a party they got invited to. And as you can well imagine, antics ensue. To summarize how I feel about Superbad after having watched it, I'm very glad to have been wrong, because it rules.
That was a close one.
As I mentioned briefly earlier, raunchy comedies are one of those types of movies that don't really work for me either. And in this case, because it sometimes feels like filmmakers, and by extension, Hollywood and the producers and whatnot, they will use profanity and shock value as a selling point for their movie, and then sometimes it's like a replacement for actual wit and genuine jokes. Superbad is different than that because, while it certainly is quite vulgar, for one thing, it fits because teenagers, actual teenagers, let's be real, they're sailor mouths. Quick side note, I should apologize if the lighting from here on out seems a little bit weird. What happened was I was recording the previous section, and then the power actually went out due to a storm while I was recording it, so that's what you have to deal with for the rest of this video, and I apologize. In any case, the other reason Superbad works really well is because there's actually a well-written story here, a very well-written one in fact, that makes for funny situations that happen organically, but one that is very well based on characters and their growth. And that's where it all begins and why it works, because those characters and their dynamics are set up perfectly from the very beginning. the first 10 to 15 minutes set up pretty much everything we need to know about this movie and the conflicts therein. I mean, we have Seth and Evan specifically, their distaste but also their sort of like reluctant reliance on Fogel, and then Fogel himself being like this cross between Jar Jar Binks and then somehow being like the sexiest kid in school. And then all three of those guys, you know, they want to get with the girls that they have crushes on. And I really mean it when I say that the very first scene of this movie tells enough of what you should expect from these characters and the growth that they experience throughout the movie, since it's literally about Seth and Evan talking on the phone about porn.
Oh dear, my poor old heart.
Yes, Mom, if you're watching this video, I know what you're thinking. Trust me on this. I mean, yeah, these guys have very vulgar conversations, and for some people, you know, watching this movie, it could turn them off from it within minutes, but it's all on purpose, not just for the sake of seeing horny teenage boys have these conversations with each other, but it's like Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, you know, the two co-writers who based this semi-autobiographically on their high school experience. It's like they used this script as a way to poke fun at themselves, but also at the shallow stuff we all worried about when we were in high school. This is made all the more evident by the fact that the driving force of this movie's plot is Seth dragging Evan and Fogel around into a scheme of obtaining booze for a house party hosted by Seth's crush Jules, played by Emma Stone, and by extension, when they get to this party and bring the booze, hopefully, you know, they can lose their virginity and whatnot. All of the humor stems from this and all of the insane misadventures that they get into as a result, the likes of which I'm not going to spoil for those who haven't seen it. I hope it would at least suffice to say that as someone who has a tough time sitting on my couch and laughing at a movie when it's just me watching it, I watched it alone on my couch because my wife wasn't interested, and this had me howling with laughter multiple times. And so that's a real compliment to this movie for making me do that, because yeah, it's tough for comedies to have that effect on me. I owe much of that to the fact that the actors in this movie are perfectly cast in the roles that they played, especially for Michael Cera and for Christopher Mintz-Plasse. I mean, Christopher in particular, who looks like an absolute hunk by the way, he couldn't have asked for a better role to make his debut with. I mean, it probably sucks for him to walk around and for people to just gawk at him and be like, hey, it's McLovin!
Wait, you changed your name to McLovin? McLovin? What kind of a stupid name is that, Fogel? What, are you trying to be an Irish R&B singer?
But, you know, if you're a 17-year-old kid and you make a debut with a movie like this and get a whole bunch of fame and fortune, you know, good for him. I myself am grateful to the fact that I was somehow oblivious to all of the memes and quotes from this movie that have been etched into pop culture over the years, for there are so many memorable scenes here that are punctuated by the very funny dialogue, as well as precisely timed cuts in the editing room, especially the hilarious flashback that goes into Seth's obsession with drawing dicks.
When I was a little kid, I kind of had this problem, and it's not even that big of a deal. Something like 8% of kids do it, but whatever. It's, for some reason, I don't know why, just kind of sit around all day and draw pictures of dicks.
What?
But to bring it all back home to the story, and not just like the comedy side of this movie, I think it's best that I watched this as a 30-year-old rather when I was in like high school, or even college for that matter, because I can appreciate it more as an exploration of friendship and finding out what's important in life, which, at this stage in my life, yeah, I've really kind of internalized that, and I don't look back on it. The interesting thing here is that Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, they wrote this script while they were still teenagers in high school. It shows in how, you know, silly and raunchy this movie is, because I bet there were high schoolers writing this down to be like, heh. But at the same time, the strange thing about that is it feels like it was written by old souls stuck in young bodies. There aren't any jocks that are played by 28-year-old men. There are no obnoxiously trashy cheerleaders, and there are no other stereotypes to speak of, people who would belong in cliques in high school, you know what I mean? It's just a story of normal, average people dealing with average, everyday things. And it shows people who you might consider to be nerds or preppy, having edges to them and realistic problems. It also doesn't try to do this whole battle of the sexes thing either. These characters are trying to navigate sexual urges and insecurities that are unique to both guys and girls. I mean, mainly guys, because it is a very guy-coded movie, but the scenario the movie presents of these kids making really dumb decisions makes for a lot of humor, sure. I mean, it is a comedy after all, but it also provides plenty of opportunities for them to confront their deep-rooted insecurities, especially the idea that a quote-unquote unpopular guy can be someone that a girl has eyes for. The story ultimately goes in a bittersweet direction that is surprisingly thoughtful and mature even, considering its subject matter. And I don't mean mature in the sense that, like, yeah, it has raunchy stuff that kids shouldn't see. I mean emotionally mature. It has perspectives on life that, for teenagers writing this supposedly when they're in high school, I'm kind of surprised that, you know, it looks at things from both a male and a female perspective in the way that it does. At the end of the day, I still prefer comedies that don't rely on being edgy to be funny, but I can appreciate that for a story like Superbad that is about teenagers trying to get some, you know, it's raunchy on the outside. The movie tries to not glorify the debauchery, and is just honest about life. For all of those reasons and more, I would happily watch Superbad again in the future, both for the laughs, the nostalgia of thinking back on how silly high school was, and for the lesson of putting away childish things in the pursuit of something greater. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like and subscribe to my channel. For doing both of those things does help my channel grow, and I will see you all in the next one.